Hello. Wanted to go over a quick recap of the three main functions of a camera when taking photos and videos and to ensure that you get the best quality. Those three features are ISO, shutter speed, and your aperture. ISO, shutter speed, and your aperture. Your ISO is here. Your shutter speed would be this fraction and can be a whole number, and your aperture will be noticed by this f number, and the f number is also represented as an f-stop. And let's start with the ISO. The ISO is just the sensitivity to light, right? The more light that we have in the picture, as you can see, the numbers getting higher and higher and higher, is going to give more light, and too much light on the darker subject will become grainy, right? So if you have a dark subject like how this is dark here, right, this has more light versus this darker subject. So the more light you put on a dark subject, you'll start to see little fine little grain that's trying to illuminate that dark subject, and that become noise. So the brighter you make the ISO, the larger you make the ISO, the brighter the image. But if it becomes too large and too bright, it damages the darker parts of the images, and you don't want that. So the lower the ISO, the better the quality of your darker items and your overall picture. So you have to keep it as low as possible and make sure it's recognizable. You don't want it so low that you cannot see what's in the picture. Too high and it becomes grainy and unusable footage. Okay? So that's one component. So if we were outside and it's sunny outside, we would be able to use the sun as part of our ISO to brighten up the picture, and that allows us to bring the ISO down. Or if we had a lot of lights, right? The lights would be the sensitivity that the camera used to light up the image, and from there we would be able to keep our ISO low. Okay? Let's look at our shutter speed. Our shutter speed measures our motion blur, right? The higher the shutter speed, the more of the image we can stay in focus, versus the lower the shutter speed. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading these numbers incorrect. The lower your shutter speed, right? 1 over 1,000 is actually lower than 1 over 4, right? 1 over 4 is pretty much a quarter, right? 1 over 8 is a smaller number. 1 over 15 smaller, right? So the smaller your ISO, your shutter speed, the more it will be able to keep in focus. And the shorter number means that the shutter speed or the shutter of the camera is moving that fast, right? Versus it's moving at a quarter of a second, right? 1/8 of a second, right? And eventually 1/1000th of a second. That's how fast it's moving, right? So the smaller number represent how fast of a second. These are in seconds, right? That the shutter is moving. So the smaller these numbers, the more of the image is in focus. So we want a fast shutter speed and we want a low ISO, right? We want to be able to capture the right amount of light, or if we can add light, and we want to be able to capture our image in focus, right? Now let's get down to our aperture, which is measured here in the f-stop number. Now the larger the number, and this diagram shows it, the more of the image is in focus. The smaller the number get, the more of the image is blurred. Now this could be a great effect of how you want to use that blur. So you might want to focus on this person here and keep the background blur. Those make up for a very cinematic image, a very focused image, and are great for portraits and headshots where the background is blurred out and it makes a very vivid image. These are the three components that you need to know in terms of photography, right? Your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. And the aperture is also measured as the f-stop, right? Your f-stop number. So take some time, review this video, learn this video, learn these features on your camera, and be prepared to understand them. Now, here's where it becomes tricky. After everything that was said there's a secondary component that these items adjust, and it affects, I should say, and it's the light. When you change your aperture, it also changes the light as well as changes the focus. When you change your shutter speed, it changes how much of the image is in blur, and it also affects the light. And the ISO, solely it's the light, right? So that's the tricky part about these. So you must come to a good number and figure out what number you should be using, and making sure that the lighting is perfect. And that's why a lot of times when people do film and photography, they add light, so they can use these numbers how they want to use them by adding their own light. The lower you can use some of these numbers, the better, right? The lower you can use your f-stop, the faster you can use your shutter speed, and the lower you can use your ISO, the better. And if you add the light, it allows you to use these numbers at their lowest quality. So add light, and it saves you a lot. Okay? Thank you very much. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.